Hi, everybody. How are we doing? Too loud? Everybody out in the crowd out there here okay, I guess? Well, there is some more space over here if anybody wants to come around or sit on the floor, please do so. So day number 4 of reInvent. Nice to see so many people here, still bright-eyed and bushy-tailed from the late hours. I think I was in a cab ride today, and that cabbie said he was working till 4 a.m. this morning pulling reInvent people around. So good to see some people here. The security truths, life from the CISO. There's definitely going to have a startup vein to it, right? We're going to go through the areas and things I've seen in the startup space, kind of bringing my previous Netflix LendingClub and now Upwork experience into that space and going through it. If there's any questions in the middle of this, raise your hand, shout them out. We'll make this more interactive so nobody's falling asleep. I don't see heads nodding or the face of your phone, lighting your face up. Why we're here, I'm going to go through some basics, some security truths. Security function, what is it? Get that question a lot. Lease versus buy, always a big question. Security by the numbers. We'll take some facts and we'll play them through and see where it gets us. Security is not the business. This is always a good one especially for security professionals to realize, to understand, unless you're working for a large security firm. Where to start? It looks daunting. Where do you begin? How do you start this journey? We'll go through a quick summary, then hopefully some good Q&A. About me, why am I here? So I'm the co-founder of Crucyble. Crucyble is a security consulting group out of Silicon Valley with the main aspect of starting to help startups kind of get their feet off the ground. Startups anywhere from people looking for seed money all the way to companies just getting ready to go public. I'm currently the CISO for Upwork. Before that, I was the CISO for LendingClub, and I ran internal security for Netflix before that. It always starts with an innocent question, right? Can you secure my data? You have one customer, you're a brand new startup, you show up, you want a bunch of personal identifiable information. They say, hey, I'm going to give it to you, but can you secure it? A lot of people kind of nod. I think we can. I think I've done I have a password, right? Is that good enough? What's the right size for your security team? I've had a number of boards and chairmans and asked me, so what's the math on the size of my security team? If I have 2 people, is that enough? Like, how many people? Just tell me how many people, Brian, or how much money I have to spend to make my system secure, and we'll just do that. Loaded question. Should we have a security engineering team? Always another good question, right? We've all had the debate of DevOps, secure DevOps. That's gone back and forth. Where should that security team be? What should it do? Should engineers just be responsible for security? Should we have security individuals writing code securing that space? What's the right question? How much is security going to cost me from the CFO, right? Is there a math equation? Is there a number I can get from Gartner that tells me exactly how much I'm supposed to spend to the dime so I won't be overspending, but yet I won't be underspending in case there is an issue? And my favorite from the CEOs, you walk the halls, who are you? Right? Right. So they tend to learn pretty quick, and that's definitely changed over, I'd say, the last probably 5 years or so. But been doing this long enough where the CEO just thought security was the guy in charge of passwords for IT, right? So that's changing, but always a good one. So let's start with some truths, right? Startups and small businesses should not be good at security, right? Should not, right? This does not mean that you don't take security into a fact or talk about the risk, but it does not mean they inherently are great at it. Startups and small businesses don't have staff lawyers yet. They don't have top A marketing level execs yet. Why is security any different? Security is not difficult. I see a lot of eyes rolling, but it does take discipline, right? There are a number of things you can do to do it. Yes, the attackers always change. The attack spaces is always getting bigger and changing day by day, but the fundamentals into which you have to do and execute to bring that down to a residual level of acceptance is discipline, and the discipline of those actions being taken every single day. Kind of to the question of, hey, what does a CISO do? So I took this, a lot of you recognize this from NIST. So these are all the areas in security you're expected to know, be an expert in, talk to, be a leader, and this doesn't include any of the management, the hiring, the upping your team, the global structure of it. So you can see there's a number of things in this list right? That you expect nobody, especially in a startup or a small business, to be hiring for, to know every single one of these disciplines and to be able to actively pursue it. Lease versus buy. Security is a multidisciplinary organization. We just saw that with the number of things you have to be good at. How do you go about, doing that? Where do you hire into that in the beginning? Where should you hire for that? Covering these disciplines takes different skilled people, right? The person who's going to do your risk is different than the person doing your security DevOps for your security groups inside of AWS. For somebody who's different doing the pen testing or the application security testing in your site. Security staff is one of the most expensive and most difficult to recruit, right? And I'll add into the slide, since it's been a little while since I've seen this, to retain, right? It's hard to find. They all have great jobs. You're talking them out of other great jobs to come join you at a brand new startup that may just have gotten their seed run funding, maybe a round, maybe have a handful of customers, and you're trying to talk them out of a great job at Amazon, right? Not an easy task to do, and not on the list of things the security individual needs to know from a technical aspect, but how do you recruit? How do you keep them? Capital expenditures should focus on innovation for your customers. You should always be looking at how best are you going to help your customers secure their data in your space. I think if you go into it with this kind of view and fundamental expectation of what you're doing for the business, you'll always have a better chair at the table when sitting with sales, when talking about enablement, when talking with the CFO about how much money you need next quarter to spend, or where you're trying to hire that next great talent. This is how I'm trying to help our customer base. This is what I'm doing to enable our business to expand faster, take in larger customers, and just generally be a good steward in the environment, right? You definitely want to be known, speaking, talking about the great things you're doing, how you're innovating that space and taking control and taking care of your customers. So security by the numbers. So I got these numbers from a February 2016 Carnegie Mellon University study. They said 3 to 6 information security staff per 100 IT staff. I kind of looked at that a little bit suspect. 1.75 information security staff per 1 internal IT auditor. That seems a little low. 1 information security staff per 5,000 network devices. What's a network device these days, right? Workstations, switches, firewalls, servers. This does not appear to include mobile devices, Docker containers, 3% to 11% of the total IT budget is allocated to information security. The authors have often seen 3 to 5% from CISOs and other literature. My view of this is that people doing great studies are looking at this as an IT problem. I don't really think this is an IT problem, right? I think this, as we're growing our business, especially as we're starting, your IT staff are usually your engineers who are doing it themselves, right? That doesn't mean that there's anybody looking at all those functions of security innovation and new attack vectors, what you're deploying to do that. This doesn't cover application development. An IT member who's setting up your Google account or your G Suite, right, is not the person who's setting up your AWS infrastructure, right? Application security QA staff is the best defense, right? Security by design, we've all heard that, right? I think that's the best aspect. The Carnegie Mellon study didn't include that. Compliance, we'll need product managers if highly regulated. If you're doing something in the finance space, and these days if you're doing anything even holding personal identifiable information, whether it be GLBA, California's privacy law that goes into effect January 1st, there's a whole section of regulations that have to be accounted for, architected, and put in the product. In the new world of microservice, serverless, Docker containers, Lambda functions, none of that's counted in this space as well, right? That sprawl, that technical sprawl also has a number of risks taken into account.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
For the first one, IT staff doesn't include application development. Are you saying the number of security people is comparable to the number of development teams you have? So about 500 development teams, I don't need any more security staff than if I have 2 development teams.
I think you definitely need more security staff, right, in doing that. But from the IT staff side, from the IT.
Do you want to repeat the question?
It's not even on.
I was trying to understand what the first bullet really meant about number of security staff was invariable to the amount of application development teams.
So anybody who didn't hear it, the question was just IT staff. How does IT staff really equate to the application development side, right? So what I'm stating is that application developers are responsible for a set of security aspects, right? And they're not adequately encompassed by counting IT staff for the number of security people that you have in application design. And as your application gets larger and becomes more complicated, I think the more staff and application staff you need to account for those kind of things, right? We've seen as your company starts to get larger, we see authentication, engineering, Scrum team starting up who's doing nothing on working on that kind of authentication, rights distribution throughout the system. Did that answer your question? So most public metrics are based on IT headcount, which I think is wrong. It should really be based on the data you're trying to secure, the number of connections you're trying to do, the global scale to which you're trying to push. Progressive models may show asset or Internet of Things count. I think you can make a review of that for the total aspect of what you're doing, but you have a very simple app that's released on the App Store that has tens of millions of, let's say, phones connecting to it, gets a very simple app and doesn't handle any PII, is a much different view than a company doing financial transactions globally or a global payments app. So I think you have to have a little bit of view of what you're doing and how you're going about it. Model speaks to FTEs only. In this new version, me being from Upwork, the aspect of global talent being around the globe to help you do things, I think not all talent has to be a full-time employee, right? You can hire and get some of the best staff to help you with a problem you have to get over, but you don't necessarily have to keep that staff on, yearly to do that task. Information security is still new. I know a lot of us have been doing this for 20 plus years, but in the view of overall applications of administration of systems going out, security as its own standalone risk organization is still fundamentally new, right? I think the first CISO was in the early 90s, and that was the number one, and now we're still can't find enough people to run security, but I think that's going to continue to be an issue. Laws and applications of those laws are still being matured. We've seen GLBA, we're seeing California privacy, we're seeing more laws come out in more jurisdictions. I think that's going to continue to change how we interact, really around that privacy law. We'll get to that in a little bit. This is putting new workloads on security. It used to be in the old days, we were just doing passwords and changing things, and now we're designing workloads, we're deploying things to the cloud, in multiple clouds, in multiple regions. So it's always continuing to evolve. Kelly Shortridge from Capsulate wrote an article and was quoted as saying, security doesn't realize how immaterial they are relative to the team, DevOps, that can justifiably argue that they support revenue-generating activities. I think this is the hardest aspect to kind of convey to management, and even from a startup aspect about you're going to spend this number of revenue that you don't necessarily have yet to employ a security team to do things that have yet not been a problem, right? This always changes after the problem, but how do you convince, the CEO, the CFO, the new founders that spending time on this security thing is really going to enable us and help us in the future and not slow us down? Thought it was a great comment from Kelly. Understanding the business, why security is important, right? Yes, you shouldn't be good at security, but security is still important to the business to look as a risk, to figure out why that is. What are you protecting and why? Start there. Are you protecting the data? Are you protecting uptime? Are you protecting both? Are you protecting your users, your employees, all the above? How do you do that? As a CSO or a CSO cannot talk to business enablement and impact, will be relegated to the corner. 100% true. If you stand there and talk about fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and all the bad things that can happen or could happen, it may work for a quarter or two. After that, you're going to be relegated to the small table in the back for things that may or may not happen that you have no analytical data to back up. Once they happen, you're in a much better spot, but then you've already lost. About the numbers. Team allocation. How should you break up your teams? What should that team look like? How many internal and external customers do you have? Great way to look at it, right? This doesn't go on a number of devices. This doesn't go on number of AZs that you're in. Allocate approved headcount across controls. Look at all those controls I had in the beginning, and how are you going to allocate responsibilities across that? Is that to individual headcount? Does that go across your application development teams? Does that go across your HR functions? How you get people onboarded, how you enable that? Does it go across your sales team? How your sales engineers talking about this risk, telling your customers about it, also super important. Small teams should resource to their personal weaknesses, something I always agree, right? Hire to your weakness. If you're a new CISO, CSO in the space, you know the things that you're already good at. You've been doing it for long enough time to take that space. Start hiring to the spaces that you don't know, right? I think that's always a key aspect. Larger teams should allocate highest risk areas. Do not overlook business impact. I've stood in many meetings and heard people give solutions that would either completely wreck the business model, slow down the system so large. If the business can't keep running and at a growing rate, there will be no need for your security in the long run. It doesn't mean that there shouldn't be hurdles and discussions about when things should slow down, when you should speed things up. But if you come in just saying, hey, just turn the system off. You know how we're most secure? Just turn it off, right? There's no reason for being, right? Or at least being for there. Business considerations. Are you a regulated or non-regulated space? If you're in the finance and payments industry, whether it's in the US, globally, Europe, Asia, that comes with a set of rules you're going to have to meet from the gate, right? From straight out. Security by design here is going to save you. Regulated by state, fed, or international sectors. Make sure you're looking at the most restrictive control, right? And base it off of that. If you're going for the most restrictive control, then you should be able to meet all the higher levels going out. Reporting. The aspects I always say, if you can't report about it, it didn't happen, right? So you may be doing awesome and great work, but if you can't report why you did it, what you found, how you resolved it, always good. Public or private sector, and then the business expectations, always a good one. Does the business have expectations to be secure out of the gate? It should, but haven't seen that. That's not always the case. Sometimes it's the case of the business expectations get out the door the quickest, be there the fastest, and then, hey, we'll try to fix the security thing, in flight. Some of that's okay, but if you're trying to fix a wing on an airplane in flight, good luck without crashing. So those major fundamental pieces should be in place as a application principle. Governance, risk, and compliance. Everyone forgets about the GRC space of this, right? Governance, risk, and compliance. This function resides in all companies, right? Every company is built on risk. You're taking a risk trying to do something. You're risking an aspect of getting a customer on board. So all companies are looking at risk, but how do they measure it? I think the information security risk is a piece that needs to be included in that. Right size for the business environment. I'm not saying that GRC has to be 18 people in a 100-person organization, but there should be a sub-factor of people talking about risk. You should be having a risk meeting, not just for cyber, but risk for the business in general, for what's coming up in the coming quarters, the coming future, and as the business grows. Reporting by design. I know I keep going over this, but it does save you in the end. Reporting this risk, communicating it equally out will help you when that CEO walks down the hall and says, who are you? They'll know pretty quickly. It's like, hey, I'm the guy talking about the cyber risk and things that we should do to fix that. And then mature each at their own rate. Not all these controls should mature at the same rate. You should attack the ones that are going to have the largest impact reducing risk for your business, which isn't the same. So whether my time at Netflix, my time at LendingClub, my time at Upwork, the number of companies that we've helped come up from this space, none of them have been the same. Each has a different risk appetite. Each are being attacked in different methodologies. Each have a different risk by the business model that they're in. You have to pair that exactly for that business. Where to start? So here's the AWS section I appreciate they gave all these icons. In the AWS cloud space, since we're here at reInvent, AWS has done a very good job of giving you the basic tools, especially as a startup and small business, to take advantage of, to start giving you information out of the gate so you can take actions to mitigate those risks. Guard Duty, Macy, the tool set has definitely gotten more robust. At my time at Netflix, none of this really existed. A lot of this was built by the cloud security team there for themselves at Netflix. Amazon has done a great job over the years of getting more AWS-centric pieces out for the community to use as large, right? It generates data at scale. I definitely think that's a good thing. Some would say that's a bad thing. How do we go through all that data? But you do need the data first before you can start taking actions on it. And then CloudFormation to survive. I'm using CloudFormation here as an AWS aspect, but what I'm really trying to say here is that all of this should be coded. If you're doing any of this manually, if you're going into the console, clicking on these things one at a time, it's not scalable. You will make mistakes, right? You'll have a bad day happen and either not know about it, right? Or have wonderful friends if you're in the United States from the FBI show up and say, hey, we found your data, right? Never a good day, right? So I think using that cloud formation, using that infrastructure as code, as we've all heard, is a paramount tenet of securing your infrastructure. One thing I also go over, no matter who I'm talking to, is the shared responsibility model. This slide is worth its weight in gold, right? Because this is a great aspect to go on when you're talking to your CTO or your CEO and explaining where your security for your small business or startups starts and ends, and what Amazon is taking over. I've heard multiple times, oh, it's in AWS, so all the security is taken care of, right? Amazon is SOC 2 certified, so that we're SOC 2 certified because we signed a contract with them, right? Unfortunately wrong, right? Amazon's done a lot of work to help secure that aspect, but the code you write, the data that you put in it, the infrastructure that you build, you're responsible for that, right? So we see everything from customer data to platform to operating system, client-side data. I'd even say, even though Amazon is managing your keys, you're responsible for the action of those keys, where they're kept, where they're stored, how many laptops, sharing them in email, all aspects of key management. And I think the other aspect too is to take advantage of the availability zones and regions that Amazon is giving. I've seen that as another great aspect for business continuity and disaster recovery. You might have blown up one AZ or one region, but you can quickly come back up in another region. Especially if you go back to the previous slide, where if you've done all that infrastructure as code, way easier to point and shoot, right? Move to the next region. You're in Oregon, redeploy to Virginia, right? You're in Ireland, redeploy as a great way to stay as a viable business. Security in the cloud. What does security in the cloud mean? I don't think it's much different than security anywhere else, right? It's back to that disciplined aspect of the risk you go after and how you do it, right? Key and root management to systems, right? I've seen this many times. You go into a business, we go to do consulting, you ask, hey, where's the root keys from when you very started this? And they're like, you know what, I have no idea. I think Joe's had those keys, but that was 3 years ago. I'm not sure where it's at. Well, where's Joe's laptop? It's like, well, it went through the crusher a week ago, right? Losing those keys is a bad day. Make sure from the very start you're putting them in a space that you can recover them. And there's multiple guides that can help you. The quick start guides that AWS has come out with, I think, are great. They definitely help you spin up spaces, give you good rules to go through, and will help you trying to recreate the wheel every single time. Amazon managed rules in WAF. When the WAF first came out, we all kind of looked at it. It was great. One more thing I have to try to code and put my own thoughts and ideas in about different ways I think the bad guys are going to get me. I think Amazon has done a great job of putting those very beginning WAF rules in that are generic, but generic enough to protect you from the most loud and present issues. Doesn't mean you can't go in there and add new things for your business or your perspective, but I think a great thing to use. AWS config, access logs, ELB, CloudFront, all great things to use that you can leverage quickly. Doesn't mean you have to use those forever, but I think they're great things out of the gate, especially for small and startup businesses. And then backup and recover. Everybody always thinks, well, I'm in the cloud, so it's just going to be persistent forever, right? Well, back it up. Test your recovery methodologies, right? If your recovery methodology is to install into another AZ or another zone or even into another cloud provider, test it. Where are the hiccups at? Where did you fall into? What did you forget about, right? How do you move your users over? What are those access rights? It's amazing the number of things that you find. So, quick summary. If you get anything out of this, align to the business goals. Make sure if you're the head of security, if you're the one-person operator, right, or you're running a huge org, make sure you can talk and align with the business goals. Makes getting funding, makes getting people, makes getting actions way more understandable and reasonable. Lease versus buy, both are good, right? I would say if you're a small business, a new startup, lease is much better on the security aspect. You can build that security by design by leasing it in the beginning, and then have a conversation. When do you start buying? Now, and where do you start buying at? What are the engineers you start adding? When do you really need a CISO? When do you really need somebody who's just great at securing infrastructure or going through log data? I think it's a good thing to have a good view on. Keep track of your data. And it seems easy from when you're in your first year of your business, like, oh, it's an RDS, or it's in Domo, or it's very simple to find out. As the business grows and things start to scale, when you get to that fourth engineer, things tend to start going a little sideways. What database, what accounts are you putting that data in? What is that data? Do you have rules that you're trying to find it? Much easier to tag it in the beginning, or at least the majority of it, before losing it. Keep track, I think is a good aspect. Communicate about security. This goes back to, you should be having a risk meeting in your organization, small, medium, or large. Information security and cyber risk should be a piece of that conversation. Risk should also be about how you're going to get customers. What's your next funding round look like? But security should always be an aspect in there. And ask questions. There's nobody in security that I know of who has all the answers, right? Not me, not even my time at Netflix, none of my time at LendingClub. Nobody had all the answers. Where as security as a new organization, there's still many things that we're uncovering. As we always say, the bad guys get a say. So we come out with an aspect, they come out with a new attack, we pivot, we keep moving, we keep changing. The discipline of continuing to ask those questions, being open about it, saying what you do know and what you don't know, I think are good aspects to harden your security and really make your business better. So real quick, I want to thank everybody for the time. We had standing people in the back. Do we have any questions or comments or? Sure. Yeah. So the question is, how do you be effective without terrorizing your C-suite for business enablement? I think that business enablement really goes on two aspects, right? It's business enablement for your customers coming in. How do you enable that business to get bigger, especially if you're in the enterprise space, right? If you're trying to sell to large banks in New York or London, definitely the questions you're going to get from that isn't. I think a little bit of terrorizing is okay, especially if you have a C-suite who's never been through a breach. Like, you don't know what this is going to look like. So I think tabletop exercises are great that include the C-suite. Don't let them get out of it. Don't let them be like, well, I'm going to send my EA instead, and he or she will answer the questions for me. It's like, no, you need that CFO, CEO in that space making those decisions. And when you run that playbook of like, okay, the New York Times just found all this data, and we had no idea about it, that completely changes the game, that's what's always enabled me to have a better aspect of that business enablement, and why that vulnerability patching is important, why that everybody has to have their own username and password is important. Those kind of things have always helped without too much terror. A little terror is okay.
So do you believe in security champions?
Sure, so one of the question is, do I believe in the security champion program? Absolutely, right? So no matter what security team you're in, you'll never be big enough to hit every single Scrum team and have a view of everything. You need more eyes, right? So having an individual, I think, in every Scrum team who has that security shirt, it's amazing what engineers will do for a t-shirt, right? Is, give them that t-shirt, make them part of start teaching about the OWASP top 10, just that basic. And what they do is they'll come to you with a question. It's like, hey, Brian, I'm seeing this, is this normal? And you're like, what the hell is that? Right? So then you start diving in deeper and deeper and deeper, and all the reason you realize is that, oh look, we're putting keys inside of code, right? You start finding out those kind of things, and then you educate. And it also helps with the group itself, because then you have people coming to you, you're an enabler, right? You're not the police, right? You're not trying to put people in jail, you're trying to enable the business to make better decisions.
Right. What kind of percentage of time you would say for the security champions, besides the regular Scrum?
So I think the question was how much time for security champ. I think in the beginning it's a little bit longer. I don't think it's any more than probably maybe 2 days a month, right? And it's broken up over time. Hour meetings about the OWASP top 10. Put them in your security bulletin that's going out. Encourage them to talk about something they're doing inside their Scrum team. I think that always definitely helps. And it's amazing how people want to be involved in it. 99% of all engineers want their code to be secure, right? So we just have to enable them to do it. Any more questions? I think that's about it. Thanks everybody for the time. I'll be hanging out afterwards. Anybody have extra questions? I appreciate it. Thank you.